Welcome to Toxic from Reddit, where real toxic relationship stories come to life. Here you'll hear true stories from people who experience toxic relationships from different perspectives. Partners dealing with cheating, manipulation, gaslighting, red flags, and all the emotional chaos that comes with loving someone who hurts you. Stories of betrayal, of finding strength to leave, of discovering the truth, of heartbreak, of healing, and the raw reality of toxic love. This is a real story, shared anonymously on Reddit. Some details have been changed to protect the identity of the people involved. Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer. I'm 31 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. And I need to tell you about the most shocking and devastating discovery that has completely destroyed my relationship and has revealed that the man I was planning to marry has been living an elaborate double life, which is that 5 weeks ago, my older sister hired a private investigator to look into my fiancé's background because she had suspicions about him. And the investigator discovered that my fiancé is already married to another woman, that he has 3 children with her, that he's been living with his wife and kids in a house 2 hours away from Portland this entire time, that he's been telling his wife that he travels for work when he's actually spending time with me, and that everything he's told me about his life, his past, his family, and his identity has been a complete fabrication. And now I'm dealing with the horrifying reality that I was about to marry a man who already has a whole other family and who has been deceiving both me and his wife for the past 2 years. I'm going to tell you this entire story from the beginning because the scope of the deception is so massive and so intricate that you need to understand how someone can live 2 completely separate lives and how I was manipulated into believing a false reality. My fiancé's name is David, or at least that's the name he told me. He's supposedly 34 years old, and we met 2.5 years ago through a dating app. My sister's name is Amanda. She's 35 years old, and she's always been very protective of me. And she's the one who uncovered the truth about David and saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. David and I matched on a dating app, and we started chatting. And I was immediately attracted to him because his profile showed a handsome, successful-looking man who described himself as a software consultant who traveled frequently for work. David's profile said that he was originally from California, that he had moved to Portland about 3 years ago for work, and that he was looking for a serious relationship. We chatted for about a week before David asked me out to dinner, and I agreed, because I felt like we had a good connection. On our first date, David took me to a nice restaurant in downtown Portland, and he was charming, attentive, and interesting. David told me about his work as a software consultant, and he explained that he worked with various companies helping them implement new technology systems, and that his job required him to travel frequently to different cities. David said that he was usually in Portland about half of the time, and that the other half of the time he was traveling to client sites in other states. I thought this was a little unusual, but I also knew that some jobs do require a lot of travel, so I didn't think too much of it. David asked me about my life, and I told him that I work as a physical therapist at a rehabilitation center in Portland, and that I love my job because I get to help people recover from injuries and surgeries. David seemed genuinely interested in my work, and he asked me thoughtful questions about what I do. We had a great first date, and David asked me out again, and I said yes. Over the next few months, David and I continued dating, and the relationship progressed. Although I noticed that David's schedule was very unpredictable. David would sometimes be in Portland for a week or 2 at a time, and then he would suddenly have to leave for work and would be gone for another week or 2. When David was in town, he was very attentive and we would spend a lot of time together. But when he was traveling, our communication was limited to text messages and occasional phone calls. I found this frustrating, but David would always apologize and would say that his work schedule was demanding and that he was often in meetings or working long hours when he was traveling. David said that he was trying to save up money so that he could eventually transition to a job that required less travel, and I appreciated that he was thinking about our future together. About 6 months into our relationship, I asked David if I could visit him at his apartment, because up until that point we had always met at restaurants or at my apartment, and I had never seen where David lived. David seemed uncomfortable with my request, and he said that his apartment was very small and messy, and that he was embarrassed to have me over. I thought this was strange, but David said that he was rarely at his apartment because he was always traveling, and that he basically just used it as a place to store his belongings. David promised that once he moved to a nicer place, he would invite me over, and I accepted this explanation even though it felt a little odd. About a year into our relationship, David and I became exclusive, and we started talking about our future together. David would talk about how much he loved me, and how he wanted to eventually get married and have a family, and I felt the same way. I introduced David to my family, including my sister Amanda and my parents. My family seemed to like David, although Amanda told me later that she thought there was something off about him, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Amanda said that David seemed evasive when people asked him questions about his life, and that his stories didn't always add up. I was defensive of David, and I told Amanda that she was being too critical, and that David was just a private person. About a year and a half into our relationship, David proposed to me during a weekend trip to the Oregon coast. David had planned a romantic evening, and he proposed to me on the beach at sunset. And of course I said yes because I was in love with him, and I believed that he was the person I was meant to spend my life with. We started planning our wedding, and we set a date for about 6 months later. I was excited about the wedding, but I started noticing that David was being very vague and unhelpful when it came to the planning process. David would say that he was too busy with work to help with the planning, or that he trusted me to make all of the decisions. I was frustrated that David wasn't more involved, but I told myself that some men just aren't interested in wedding planning. I also noticed that David was being evasive about his family. Like when I would ask him about inviting his parents and his siblings to the wedding, David would say that he wasn't close with his family and that he didn't think they would come. David said that he had grown up in a dysfunctional family and that he had distanced himself from them as an adult. I felt sad for David that he didn't have a close relationship with his family, but I didn't push the issue because I didn't want to make him uncomfortable. About 4 months before our wedding, my sister Amanda came to me and said that she needed to talk to me about David. Amanda said that she had been doing some thinking and that she was concerned about how little we actually knew about David's life. Amanda said that it was strange that David traveled so much for work, that we had never seen his apartment, that he never talked about his friends or his coworkers, and that he had no relationship with his family. Amanda said that she thought David might be hiding something, and that she wanted to hire a private investigator to look into his background before I married him. I was offended and angry, and I said, "Amanda, you can't just hire a private investigator to spy on my fiancé. That's crazy and invasive." And Amanda said, "Jennifer, I'm your sister and I love you, and I just want to make sure that you're not making a mistake. There are too many red flags here, and I think we need to know the truth about who David really is." I said, "I know who David is. He's the man I love and the man I'm going to marry, and I don't need a private investigator to tell me that." Amanda said, "Please, just let me do this. If the investigator doesn't find anything concerning, then I'll apologize and I'll never bring it up again. But if there is something wrong, wouldn't you want to know before you marry him?" I was torn because part of me was offended that Amanda didn't trust David, but part of me was also curious about what an investigator might find. I finally agreed to let Amanda hire the private investigator, but I made her promise that she wouldn't tell anyone else about it, and that if the investigator didn't find anything, she would drop the issue completely. Amanda agreed, and she hired a private investigator who specializes in background checks and infidelity investigations. The investigator started working on David's case, and Amanda told me that it would probably take a few weeks to gather information. During those few weeks, I tried to act normal around David, but I felt guilty and anxious about the fact that he was being investigated. I kept telling myself that the investigator wouldn't find anything, and that this would all be over soon and Amanda would have to apologize. About 3 weeks later, Amanda called me and said that she needed to see me immediately, and that the investigator had found something. I went to Amanda's house, and she sat me down and said, "Jennifer, I'm so sorry, but you need to see what the investigator found." Amanda showed me a thick folder full of documents, photographs, and reports that the investigator had compiled. The investigator had discovered that David's real name is actually Michael Patterson, and that he's 36 years old, not 34 like he told me. The investigator had discovered that Michael is married to a woman named Sarah Patterson, and that they've been married for 12 years. The investigator had discovered that Michael and Sarah have 3 children together, 2 daughters aged 10 and 7, and a son aged 4. The investigator had discovered that Michael and Sarah lived together in a house in Salem, Oregon, which is about an hour and a half south of Portland. The investigator had photographs of Michael with his wife and children, photographs of Michael going to his children's school events, photographs of Michael and his wife grocery shopping together, and photographs of Michael at his house in Salem doing yard work and playing with his kids. I felt like I couldn't breathe, and I thought I was going to pass out. I said, "This can't be real. This has to be a mistake. This can't be the same person." But Amanda showed me the photographs, and it was definitely David, or Michael, or whoever he really was. The investigator had also discovered that Michael works as an accountant at a firm in Salem, not as a software consultant like he had told me. The investigator had discovered that Michael had been telling his wife Sarah that he travels frequently for work, and that he stays in hotels when he's supposedly on business trips. But in reality, he's been spending that time with me in Portland. The investigator had discovered that Michael has been living this double life for at least 2.5 years, which is exactly how long I've been dating him. I started crying, and I said, "How is this possible? How could he do this? How could he lie about everything?" Amanda hugged me, and she said, "I'm so sorry, Jennifer. I know this is devastating, but I'm glad we found out before you married him." I spent the next several hours looking through all of the evidence that the investigator had gathered, and I felt sick to my stomach. I saw photographs of Michael's wedding to Sarah, photographs of Sarah pregnant with their children, photographs of Michael at his children's birthday parties, and photographs of what looked like a happy family. I realized that while Michael was telling me that he loved me and wanted to marry me, he was going home to his wife and children and living a completely different life. I realized that every time Michael told me he was traveling for work, he was actually going home to his real family. I realized that Michael had created an entirely fake identity for me, with a fake name, a fake job, a fake background, and fake life story. I didn't know what to do, and I asked Amanda what she thought I should do. Amanda said that I needed to confront Michael and end the relationship immediately, and that I should also consider telling his wife Sarah what had been going on. I agreed that I needed to confront Michael, but I wasn't sure if I should tell Sarah, because I didn't want to be the one to destroy her family. Amanda said that Sarah deserved to know the truth about who her husband really was, and that if I didn't tell her, Michael would probably just continue his pattern of deception with other women. I decided that I would confront Michael first, and then I would decide what to do about telling Sarah. I called Michael and asked him to meet me at a coffee shop, and I said that I needed to talk to him about something important. Michael agreed to meet me, and when he arrived at the coffee shop, he seemed relaxed and unsuspecting. I had brought some of the photographs that the investigator had taken, and I put them on the table in front of Michael. I said, "Who are you really? And who are these people?" Michael looked at the photographs, and his face went completely white, and he was silent for a long moment. Then Michael tried to deny it, and he said, "I don't know what this is. These aren't pictures of me. Someone is trying to set me up." I said, "Stop lying. I know everything. I know your real name is Michael Patterson. I know you're married to Sarah. I know you have 3 children. I know you live in Salem. And I know you've been lying to me about everything for the past 2.5 years. Michael realized that he couldn't deny it anymore, and he put his head in his hands and said, "I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen." I said, "You never meant for what to happen? You never meant to get caught? You never meant to create an entire fake identity and lie to me about every aspect of your life?" Michael said, "I don't know what to say. I made a terrible mistake." I said, "This isn't a mistake, Michael. This is a calculated pattern of deception. You've been living a double life for years. You've been lying to me, and you've been lying to your wife, and you were going to marry me while you were already married to someone else." I said, "Were you planning to commit bigamy? Were you planning to be married to 2 women at the same time?" Michael said, "No, I was going to tell you the truth before the wedding. I was going to call it off." I said, "I don't believe you. I think you were going to go through with it. And I think you've been doing this because you're a narcissist who gets pleasure from manipulating people and living a double life." Michael started crying, and he said, "Please don't tell Sarah. Please don't destroy my family. My children need me." I said, "You should have thought about that before you started lying to everyone. Your children deserve to have a father who's honest and who doesn't live a secret life." I said, "And Sarah deserves to know who she's really married to." Michael begged me not to tell Sarah, and he said that he would end things with me and that he would never contact me again, and that he would be a better husband to Sarah. I said, "It's too late for that. You've already destroyed everything." I left the coffee shop and I blocked Michael's number and deleted him from all of my social media. Over the next few days, I thought about whether I should contact Sarah and tell her what had been going on. I felt guilty about the affair, even though I hadn't known that Michael was married, and I felt like Sarah deserved to know the truth. I finally decided that I would reach out to Sarah, because I would want someone to tell me if I were in her position. I found Sarah on social media, and I sent her a private message explaining who I was and what had happened. I said, "I know this is going to be incredibly difficult to hear, but I've been in a relationship with your husband for the past 2.5 years, and I only just found out that he's married and has children. I'm so sorry, I had no idea, and I thought you should know the truth." I also sent Sarah some of the evidence that the private investigator had gathered, including photographs and documents that proved that Michael had been living a double life. Sarah responded to my message a few hours later, and she said, "Thank you for telling me. I had no idea. I thought my husband was traveling for work. I can't believe this is happening." Sarah and I ended up talking on the phone, and we compared notes about Michael's lies and his patterns of behavior. Sarah told me that Michael had been acting strangely for the past few years, like he had been distant and distracted, and he had been spending more and more time away from home, supposedly for work. Sarah said that she had suspected that Michael might be having an affair, but that she had never imagined that he was living an entire double life with a fake identity. Sarah told me that she was going to confront Michael, and that she was probably going to file for divorce, because she couldn't stay married to someone who had betrayed her so completely. I felt terrible for Sarah and for her children, and I apologized repeatedly for my role in the affair, even though I hadn't known that Michael was married. Sarah was very gracious, and she said that she didn't blame me, and that Michael was the one who had deceived both of us. Over the next few weeks, I learned through Sarah that Michael had admitted everything to her, and that she had filed for divorce. Sarah also told me that she had discovered that I wasn't the first woman that Michael had had an affair with, and that he had a pattern of creating fake identities and having relationships with multiple women while staying married to her. Sarah said that she felt like she had been married to a stranger, and that she didn't know who Michael really was. I felt the same way, like I had been in a relationship with someone who didn't actually exist. I've been going to therapy to help me process the betrayal and to help me understand how I was manipulated. My therapist has explained to me that people who live double lives often have personality disorders or psychological issues that make them compulsive liars and manipulators. My therapist has helped me understand that Michael's behavior was not a reflection of my worth or my judgment, and that he was very skilled at creating a false reality that was convincing enough to deceive multiple people for years. My therapist has also been helping me work through my feelings of guilt about the affair, because even though I didn't know Michael was married, I still feel responsible for the pain that Sarah and her children are experiencing. But my therapist has reassured me that I'm not responsible for Michael's choices, and that he's the one who chose to lie and to betray his family. I've been thinking a lot about the red flags that I missed or ignored, like how Michael never let me see his apartment, like how he was always traveling and his schedule was unpredictable, like how he had no relationship with his family, like how he was evasive when people asked him questions about his life, and like how he wasn't involved in planning our wedding. I've realized that all of these were signs that something wasn't right, but I ignored them because I was in love with Michael, and because I wanted to believe that he was who he said he was. I've learned that it's important to pay attention to red flags, and that it's important to verify important information about someone's life before you commit to marrying them. I've been incredibly grateful for my sister Amanda, because she literally saved me from marrying a man who was already married and who was living a complete lie. If Amanda hadn't hired that private investigator, I would have married Michael, and I would have eventually discovered the truth in an even more devastating way. Amanda risked our relationship by insisting on investigating Michael, and I'm so grateful that she did, because she was right to be suspicious. I've told Amanda that she's not just my sister, she's my hero, and I don't know what I would have done without her. I've been thinking about Michael's children and about how this situation is going to affect them. Those children are innocent victims of their father's deception, and they're going to grow up knowing that their father lived a double life and betrayed their mother. I feel terrible for them, and I hope that Sarah is able to protect them and help them heal from this trauma. I've been thinking about how many other women Michael might have deceived over the years, and whether there are other women out there right now who think they're in relationships with him and who have no idea that he's married. I've thought about trying to find these women and warn them, but I also don't know how I would even begin to do that. I've been thinking about the legal implications of what Michael did, like whether he could be charged with fraud or bigamy or some other crime. I talked to a lawyer, and the lawyer said that what Michael did was morally reprehensible, but probably not technically illegal, unless he had actually gone through with marrying me while still being married to Sarah, which would have been bigamy. The lawyer said that Sarah could potentially sue Michael for emotional distress or for fraud, but that it would be difficult to prove damages. I've been thinking about my own healing process, and about how I'm going to move forward after this betrayal. I know that it's going to take a long time for me to trust again, and I know that I'm going to be much more cautious in future relationships. But I'm committed to doing the work to heal, and I'm committed to not letting this experience make me bitter or cynical about love. I've been spending time with friends and family who support me, and I've been focusing on self-care and on activities that bring me joy. I've also been educating myself about narcissistic personality disorder, and about people who live double lives, because I want to understand what happened, and I want to be able to recognize the warning signs in the future. I've been thinking about dating again eventually, but I'm not ready yet, because I need to heal and I need to feel confident in my ability to recognize red flags and to trust my instincts. When I do start dating again, I know that I'm going to be much more careful about vetting potential partners, and I'm going to be more assertive about asking questions and verifying information. I'm going to pay attention if someone is evasive about their living situation or their family or their work, and I'm going to trust my gut if something feels off. I've been thinking about other people who might be in similar situations, who might be dating someone who's living a double life, and I want to tell them to pay attention to the warning signs. I want to tell them to be suspicious if their partner is always traveling or has an unpredictable schedule, or if their partner won't let them see where they live, or if their partner has no relationship with their family or friends. I want to tell them to be suspicious if their partner is evasive when asked questions about their life, or if their partner's stories don't add up or change over time. I want to tell them to listen to their friends and family if they express concerns about their partner, because the people who love you can often see things that you can't see when you're in love. And I want to tell them that if they have suspicions about their partner, they should investigate, whether that means hiring a private investigator or doing their own research or asking direct questions and demanding honest answers. I want to tell them that it's better to find out the truth before you marry someone, even if the truth is painful, than to marry someone and then discover that your entire relationship was based on lies. And I want to tell them that if they discover that their partner has been living a double life, it's not their fault, and they shouldn't blame themselves for not seeing the signs sooner. I want to tell them that people who live double lives are often very skilled manipulators who are experts at creating false realities, and that even smart, careful people can be deceived. And I want to tell them that healing is possible, and that even though the betrayal feels devastating right now, they will eventually be able to trust again and to open their hearts to someone who's honest and authentic. Thank you for reading my story. And if you've been through something similar, if you've discovered that your partner was living a double life, if you found out that your partner was already married, if a family member saved you from making a terrible mistake, or if you've had to rebuild your ability to trust after massive deception, I would love to hear how you dealt with it and where you are now. I'm still healing from this experience, still processing the betrayal, still working on rebuilding my sense of trust, and still figuring out what I want my future to look like. But I'm grateful that I found out the truth before I married Michael. And I'm grateful for my sister Amanda, who literally saved my life by insisting on investigating him even when I didn't want her to.